Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Khalil Ekolona, and this is Nashville. 184 years ago, the United States government, led by President Andrew Jackson, forced roughly 16,000 Cherokee people from their homes in Tennessee and neighboring states. The Cherokee, along with people of the Muscogee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, and Seminole nations, were forced to walk the Trail of Tears to Oklahoma. Sections of the trail pass right through present-day Nashville. This is a part of our history, but it's mostly out of view. What does it mean for our city? And how can we reconcile this piece of our story? Later this hour, we'll talk with Native activists and historians about the legacy and future of the Trail of Tears. But first, for Republicans in Tennessee, transgender care has catapulted into a top issue this campaign season, complete with a rally at the state capitol at the end of this week. The most recent flare-up was sparked by a misleading segment from an anti-trans activist who lives here in Nashville. He claimed Vanderbilt's pediatric transgender clinic was, quote, mutilating children. Conservative politicians seized on that slogan and demanded Vanderbilt stand down. WPLN's senior healthcare reporter Blake Farmer has been following it all, and he joins me now. Hey, Blake, welcome back.
Hey, Khalil.
So let me get this right. There's a political rally this week at the Tennessee Capitol regarding gender-affirming care for teens, right?
Correct. It's Friday afternoon, though they are not using such sensitive language like gender-affirming care. They call this a rally to end child mutilation.
Who's behind this rally?
Well, it's the same guy who started this firestorm for Vanderbilt's pediatric clinic. His name is Matt Walsh. He works for the Daily Wire, has also produced a documentary that came out this year called What is a Woman? But he is very well connected politically. Marsha Blackburn, our U.S. Senator, says she will be in attendance. It'll be interesting, though, to see whether this is really an issue that is resonating with rank and file, you might call them voters in Tennessee. But certainly this is an issue that has entered the political spin cycle at this point. I was listening to a Titans game on the radio last Sunday, like you do. I mean, we're radio people.
Yeah.
On 104.5 The Zone, heard this ad, a radio ad, a minute-long ad that was going after pediatric trans care.
Is this the same crowd behind those ads?
Actually, no. At the end, you hear the little disclaimer. It says, paid for by America First Legal. So I looked them up, and this is a group started by Stephen Miller, if that name sounds familiar. Yeah. That is President Trump's former speechwriter, who is responsible for many things in the Trump administration, including many of its policies on immigration and others. Anyway, we have not heard back from them on exactly why they were running this ad and kind of where they make some of their claims, what they're based on. Curiously, this ad doesn't even mention Vanderbilt, but it clearly is going after the left and President Biden over them promoting, use of hormone therapies, although they say things like, trying to get girls to grow facial hair.
So earlier this month, Vanderbilt said that they were going to pause gender-affirming surgeries as Republican state lawmakers asked. What does that mean for them practically?
In saying that they were pausing surgeries, Vanderbilt also pointed out that they do very few of them. In fact, they say on average, and haven't been around but since 2018, but on average it's been 5 a year and never genital surgeries. So they don't say this exactly, but we would presume those would be what are known as TOPS surgeries, usually breast removal. But much more of what they do is related to hormone therapy, which under the standards of care often happens in those early teen years. And curiously, state lawmakers who were making these demands for Vanderbilt to stop surgeries did not mention having a problem with hormone therapy in this letter, which I found peculiar.
State lawmakers have proposed restricting hormone therapy for trans teens in the past few years. So should we expect more proposals like that when they reconvene in January?
I really don't know. There are a few lawmakers who are still very bothered by hormone therapy, even just the idea of it as folks transition in their puberty years. And they really want them to be much harder to use. But the debate last year over a couple of bills, I think, was instructive. So in the end, what you had was some of the more moderate Republicans sort of heading off some of the more extreme restrictions on use of hormones for trans teens. And they did this essentially by passing a bill that sounds like it restricts hormone therapy in Tennessee and restriction of puberty blockers, but it was limited to prepubescent kids. And even at the time, the head of Vanderbilt's pediatric transgender health clinic told lawmakers that this really doesn't mean much because they would never start hormones before puberty.
So was this just sort of symbolic? It sounds like they passed a law that doesn't really do anything except give them a way to say they did something to rein in transgender care for kids.
You could argue that it does keep hormone therapy from creeping earlier and earlier, which I think is a fear that some have expressed. But yes, it feels like it was mostly symbolic. So as this political flare-up kind of plays out, I'm interested to see what state lawmakers really will do when they reconvene in January. They have had hearings in the last couple of years where Vanderbilt representatives from this very clinic appeared and have been questioned, and it was not so controversial, at least not so controversial as it's become in the last few weeks. And even lawmakers who signed onto this letter demanding Vanderbilt to stop surgeries on minors were some of the same folks who in those hearings mentioned that they understand that regulating hormone therapy, is kind of fraught. For instance, these same endocrinologists who would work with kids who start, who are transitioning, they also work with kids who might be starting puberty early and need these puberty blockers or hormones to kind of influence how puberty is going in their own gender.
So does any of this seem to address the concerns of parents or trans kids themselves?
Well, the concerns of kids and their parents, certainly parents have their own concerns as they're walking their children through these transitions. I mean, there is so much going on in a family where a child who was assigned female at birth is now transitioning. They are very concerned, but their biggest concern really is how state lawmakers might intervene between them and what they are being told they should do by their health professionals, their doctor.
So at this point, is anyone accusing Vanderbilt of breaking any laws at this pediatric clinic that offers transgender care?
Really no. And I think this sort of shows the misleading nature of the supposed expose that started this whole thing. It suggested people who had moral objections to participating in care were being forced to participate. Well, Vanderbilt says it has a policy that allows anyone to opt out, and they don't discriminate against people who opt out. Okay, there was also a suggestion that Vanderbilt was doing these surgeries because they were big moneymakers. And yes, there is a video of a doctor saying gender affirmation surgeries can be revenue generators, but then you learned that there have been about 5 a year and never on genitals, which are the ones that even in this video supposedly make the most revenue. And of course, they're referencing the surgeries for adults. So, it does not appear that anyone at this point is accusing Vanderbilt of breaking a law.
So is Vanderbilt pushing back against any effort?
Well, they're being noticeably quiet. I mean, we talk to Vanderbilt all the time. I mean, they're one of the biggest employers in town. The medical center is one of the biggest employers in town. This is an issue they will not grant an interview on right now. And it seems like they won't be doing that for quite some time. If you're listening, we're open. We're all ears. But that doesn't mean they're not talking to us off the record and certainly issuing statements. But their statements, even when they said that they were stopping surgeries, they stated that they would likely restart after a while. They said that they were sort of going to review the clinical guidelines, kind of make sure that they were on firm footing and start again. But in the end, they also said, this is a letter to state lawmakers, they said that they will follow whatever laws are passed in the future. Now, will they be working behind the scenes to influence what laws might be created? This is why Vanderbilt has full-time lobbyists on staff. But, I do not think you are going to see them making a big public display or campaign to defend their work on this front. The issue is just too volatile, too hot right now in Tennessee politics.
Okay, get out of here and keep on reporting on this story.
Will do.
Blake Farmer is the senior healthcare reporter here at WPLN News. Blake, thanks again for this, and thanks for your reporting. We have to take a short break. When we come back, we will look at the legacy of the Trail of Tears, which has routes that cross through our city. Do you have an ancestor that was forced to walk the Trail of Tears? Tweet us at This Is Nashville. We'll be right back.
Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Khalil A. Colonna, and this is Nashville. Today we are talking about the Trail of Tears. Parts of the trail run through Tennessee and right through Nashville. A few times a month, we're going to take you out into the city with us to show you an ordinary street corner, a parking lot, a patch of forest floor. Now, I know what you're thinking. That doesn't sound very exciting. Our goal here is to peel back the layers on the overlooked parts of our city and region, past and present. Today, we're dropping a pin on Gay Street in downtown Nashville, a spot on the riverbank beside the Victory Memorial Bridge. Nearly 200 years ago, about 1,000 Cherokee people came here, almost all of them on foot, and crossed over the Cumberland River. They were on their way to Indian Territory in present-day Oklahoma. It was a difficult journey that they were forced to take. And for about a quarter of the people who walked what became known as the Trail of Tears, it was fatal. The bridge the Cherokee crossed over is gone, but today one part of the original structure still stands. Our senior producer, Steve Harouche, took a visit to the site over the weekend.
To reach the bridge, the Cherokee walked up 2nd Avenue, right through what is now the heart of Nashville's tourist district. It's early in the afternoon, but there are people everywhere, and every few minutes, a transportation vehicle rumbles slowly by. At the corner of 2nd and Commerce, I meet up with Toy Heap. He's vice president of the Native History Association, and he's been researching the Trail of Tears for a long time. He tells me there's a newspaper account that indicates on this day, October 15th, the first group of Cherokee came through Nashville on the Trail of Tears.
As our paper was going to press, it was printed on the 16th. A detachment of Cherokee passed through our town.
He unrolls a map that shows how the streets were configured back in 1838.
So they came in on Murfreesboro Road and runs into Lafayette Street. And from that point, they could have gone up First Avenue. Well, at that time, that was called Water Street. But that was where the wharf was, where they unloaded the steamboats, and it was incredibly busy.
Back then, 2nd Avenue was called Market Street, and it would have made a lot more sense to go this way and avoid the traffic jam at the wharf. This way was also less steep.
The detachments they averaged like 1,000 people. There were 11 that came the overland route or the northern route and actually passed through Nashville. So what the citizens of Nashville would have seen at the time was a line of people like 1,000 people long, probably in single file or two abreast to avoid blocking the road. And even though they had supply wagons, almost all of them walked. So they were on foot almost the whole way. So standing here 184 years ago, that's what you would have seen.
Toy says they would have been dressed, well, a lot like the people in Nashville. So maybe, despite their numbers, they just kind of blended in.
It's kind of odd because the newspapers before, from early 1838, when they were doing the roundup and everything, they have a lot of news about the roundup, but then when they actually start coming through, there's only a few articles that actually say the Cherokee were passing through here at the time, and basically that's all they say. One of the newspapers had apparently voiced some concern in one of their articles about the condition of the Cherokee. Some of them had problems getting supplies.
It's a little jarring walking this path today, with the backdrop of music blasting from party buses and bars. We continue walking north up 2nd Avenue, surrounded by construction barricades, until we reach the public square.
Yeah, the square was basically in the same place, but it was laid out different. So when the Cherokee came through here, they would have seen the courthouse over here to our right, and the market house would be to the left.
There were also a couple of hotels back then. Today, there's a man playing catch with his dog on a patch of grass as we walk over the same land that the Cherokee crossed over on their way to the Nashville toll bridge. At the time, it was the only way to cross the Cumberland without taking a ferry, which for a group of this size just wouldn't have been practical. And the bridge is probably one of the main reasons the Cherokee came through Nashville. It was a covered bridge with 2 lanes of traffic and a pedestrian walkway on each side. We head east across the square and down a set of stairs to Gay Street. And down here, there are 2 interpretive plaques, which Toy worked on getting installed. One is dedicated to the history of the bridge itself.
The guy that designed it, his name was Louis Wernwag. He was a big deal in 19th century engineering. He's a very significant figure. So when we were communicating to the National Park Service, and telling them, so this is a Louis Wernwag bridge, they were like, wow. That really, that really turned them on. They were, really excited about that because he's a big deal.
The other plaque is dedicated to the removal of the Cherokee and the Trail of Tears. Looking up from the plaque, all we can really see is a chain link fence and a lot of brush and weeds. We actually have to walk about 20 feet to the left before we can look back behind where the plaques are. And then we see it.
So we're looking at the corner of a bridge abutment. It's built out of cut stone that's stacked. The abutment, it's like a rectangular structure, and we're looking at the northern corner of it. From where we're standing, we can't even see the base of it because it's so big. When you're down on the riverbank looking up at it, that's when it really makes its impact on how massive it was.
Standing here, I try to imagine what it would have been like to leave your home behind, walking hundreds of miles on foot toward an uncertain future in a place you'd never seen. And I have to admit, it's kind of overwhelming. I asked Toy how he's feeling.
Well, it's, I try to stay focused on the historical aspect of it. It's a disturbing episode in our history. It's something that never should have happened. And it's real easy to get lost in that, and you just start thinking, I just can't think about this anymore.
He also says we should remember that while this is a story of loss, it's also a story of a people overcoming tremendous hardship. The Cherokee culture is still alive today, despite everything it's endured. Toy hopes that more signage and plaques will make the Trail of Tears more visible here in Nashville.
You see all those people on 2nd Avenue, and there would be a certain percentage of them, I think, that would be interested in knowing that this is down here. So if we had stuff out there that direct them here, then that would be a good thing.
That was Toy Heap, Vice President of the Native History Association, and he joins me now. Also with me is Melba Chakotay Eads, a member of the Muscogee Creek Nation of Oklahoma. Toy, Melba, thank you both for being here. Welcome to This is Nashville. Now, before we start, Melba, I understand that you'd like to share something with us.
Yes, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here and to be able to share this. This comes directly from my principal chief, David Hill, in Muscogee, Oklahoma, which is our capital, the capital of the great Muscogee Creek Nation, and it's a land acknowledgement. It's very important that we acknowledge the land and the people who once lived here. So this is from our chief, David Hill. It says, "We acknowledge that we are on the traditional land of indigenous peoples, including the Mississippian people and their descendants, the Yuchi, the Muscogee, the Quasati, the Shawnee, the Chickasaw, and the Cherokee Nation. Nashville is located between the ancient city of Moundville, Browns Creek, Castillo Springs Mound, Sellers Farm, and other sacred places. We would like to honor and acknowledge and recognize the indigenous tribes and the tribal nations who were forcibly removed as the original inhabitants and the keepers of the land and water that now make up this present-day Nashville and other areas of Tennessee. Tribes that were forcibly removed to the lands west of the Mississippi River to Oklahoma Indian Territory are the Cherokee Nation, the Chickasaw Nation, the Choctaw Nation, Muscogee Nation, and the Seminole Nations."
Thank you very much for sharing that with us, Melba. And, part of the trail, it crosses right through downtown Nashville, but these plaques that we just heard about are a little off the beaten path. Toy, do you feel like most people here are aware of this history we share? Toy, are you with us? Let me ask you that, Melba.
Well, I don't think that they are. This is a busy, thriving, fast-growing city of Nashville. And as we look back 180, maybe 5 years ago, these people of indigenous people of the 5, and they were called civilized tribes at that time, they walked here and they came through 39 counties in the state of Tennessee in different, as Toy has already said, different detachments of maybe about 1,000 or so peoples. And we are talking today, in particular, the Northern Trail. Mostly the Northern Trail is what he was talking about. Mm-hmm. And what people don't know, he's lifted up the Cherokee, and the Muscogee people also were walking with the Cherokee on the Northern Trail. And so that's quite interesting in my thoughts. So when we talk about the removal, a lot of people would be aware maybe about the Cherokee, but they would not be aware of the Muscogee Creek people or the Chickasaw, Choctaw, or Seminole peoples that were removed at the same time. Mm-hmm. A tragedy and ethnic cleansing of the southeast of the United States.
Part of understanding more about our shared connection to this and to better our knowledge on what the trail was and where it was is, coming to the truth. Because this wasn't just one trail, right? I mean, Toy, what were the routes that came through Tennessee?
Well, we already talked about the 11 that came through Nashville. Another route that crossed through southern Tennessee
was the Bell route. It went through Pulaski and Lawrenceburg, across where the David Crockett State Park is now. There's an original segment of the trail that still exists there in the park, and they went on across to Memphis and on out to Indian Territory that way. Another detachment left Fort Payne, Alabama, and went through Pulaski too. In fact, those routes crossed there in Pulaski and went on out through northwest Tennessee. And there were also three, the original detachments they traveled on the water. The original plan of the military was to do the whole removal by boat, but there was a severe drought that summer. It was a very hot summer. And those three detachments that traveled by steamboat, they ran aground at low water, and they experienced very high death tolls. So that's when the Cherokee petitioned Winfield Scott, the general that was leading the removal, to actually let them conduct the removal themselves. So those are the detachments that travel through Tennessee.
If you're just tuning in, this is Nashville, and I'm your host, Khalil Ekalona. We're talking this hour about the Trail of Tears with Native historian Toy Heap and Native activist Melba Chakotay Eads. Now, Melba, I understand you have a direct connection to the Trail of Tears. Can you tell me about that?
Well, my great-great-grandfather was removed from Fort Mitchell, Alabama, and you have to remember that being a Muscogee woman, and living here in the state of Tennessee, before removal, we had what was called the Creek War. And ultimately, the Creeks fought 2 wars to try to prevent being removed. And but this descendant was my great-great-grandfather, and he was Hajidi. And so he had been born in the land of Georgia, which was our land, and Hajidis are South Georgia. And as time went by, their lands in Georgia were succeeded. And so his family crossed over the Chattahoochee River into Alabama and were around Fort Mitchell, Alabama, which is just across the river. And so he left from that area, and the Creeks had a horrible time. They were early on to leave. They had forced removal. They had the killing of William McIntosh when he succeeded land in the Treaty of Indian Springs. And so when we think about that hard time and the brutalness of both our National Council to prevent the people from signing and being removed, and then the holdout till the final last and the Second Creek War to be actually in change and removed at that time. But he was a child about 10 years old.
10.
And that's when he left on the Trail of Tears.
So tell me, like, what does learning about your ancestors in this way, and these stories that your family has told you, how has that really inspired you to dedicate yourself to educate others about this history that we all share?
Well, you know, it's a hard history to talk about. And it's a hard thing to think that children and elders were the first to perish on these trails. I think I read in a book somewhere that children under the age of 5 probably would not survive, and elders under the age of 60 or 59, something like that, would not survive this removal. And in our family, we were always told we did not want to go. We were not going. We fought a war, we were not going. And we still ended up leaving. But the women said, we have the seeds of the unborn within us. And if we do not go, they won't have a chance to live. And so they marched on, and they suffered terrible losses, and they still walked on. The paper in Little Rock records, because remember, these are Southern Indians, and they had calico, cotton clothing, and they recorded that the Muscogee people that had been camped there, they wrote in the newspaper there at Little Rock, bloody footprints in the snow as the creeks left.
Wow. Toy, you took our producer, Steve Harouche, you took him down to the remains of the bridge downtown. Tell me, what are some sections of the trail that people can still visit today?
You can really visit almost the whole length of the trail. Of course, the original road beds aren't there. There are a few places, though, where they are. There's a place in Rutherford County. It's on a Corps of Engineers property. It's the site of a town called Jefferson that was actually evacuated when the Corps built the Stones River Dam. They thought it would flood the entire town. There's a segment of the trail that runs through there. This was part of 4 detachments left the main route and traveled north of Murfreesboro, we think to avoid high tolls that they were being charged, because they traveled, most of these roads were toll roads. And these 4 detachments went through Old Jefferson. That trail is marked. There is like I mentioned earlier, the David Crockett State Park in Lawrenceburg that has a well-preserved section of the original road bed. You could also make the case that the Fort Nashboro Interpretive Center could be considered a site that's related to the Trail of Tears, because that's just like a block away from 2nd Avenue where the Cherokee walked. And of course, it's the site of the first fort that was built by the Euro-American people that were coming in and occupying the land. And that was really one of the big factors early on that led to the eventual removal of the Cherokee. So I would consider that to be a site on the trail as well. You could also visit the Hermitage. That's actually a certified site on the trail. It may sound strange to hear me recommending visiting the home of the man who was probably most responsible for initiating Indian removal, but
you're talking about former President Andrew Jackson.
Andrew Jackson.
Yeah,
that's right. He introduced he proposed the Indian Removal Act not long after he was elected president.
Yeah,
and they don't have a real big exhibit there about his role in the Trail of Tears, but I think you could make a visit to the Hermitage just knowing that this was one of the main people responsible for the trail, and I think that's something that people should probably be aware of.
Let's take a really quick break. When we come back, we'll look deeper into the Trail of Tears and how we can remember this time in our history and what it means to our region. What do you wish you had learned about the Trail of Tears? Tweet us at This Is Nashville. We'll be right back. I'm Khalil Ekalona, and this is Nashville. We've been talking this hour about the Trail of Tears and its connection to our city and region. While there are a few signs and posts on display, it's not always easy to know exactly where the trail was. And as we heard earlier, even when there are plaques and the landmarks they describe aren't always clearly visible. But some people have been working to change that, to make this history more present and to honor the memories of the people who were forced to walk on the trail. Melba Chakotay Eads is still with me, and she has been doing this work. Now, Melba, you started doing trail walks in 2002. Tell me, why did you decide to do that?
Well, we were affiliated with the powwow, the Yahola powwow at that time, and I think it's Wilco powwow. They just had it about 2 weeks ago, and the Don Yahola started that powwow, and he's a Muscogee citizen, and so we Creeks were real close to. We stick together. We're a small group here in Tennessee, living at large in the state of Tennessee, but we were approached by an individual at Cook's United Methodist Church. He said he sees a sign every time he drives by, and he wonders if we could do something about the Trail of Tears. So he asked me and Cindy, what do we thought? And we thought, well, we'll just commemorate with a walk. And so we started our walk, and I started Jeanette Washington, my cousin Dawn Washington. They came from Okmulgee. And we decided we had been doing some work here, bringing Native American awareness, and we call it our ministry. Mm-hmm. And we had done several things prior to that opportunity. And we decided, yes, we should do a walk to commemorate and remember about not only the Muscogee people, but the 5 tribes that were removed, because a lot of times people don't know that. So we started that. And one particular time when we were walking, it poured down rain. I mean, not just a little pour down. I mean,
a heavy storm, huh?
The heaviest storm. And we were in our creek dresses. We looked, of course, beautiful. And we're driving through the rain to get to the church, because we were going to walk a mile. We used to walk a mile. And we couldn't even see the road. The rain was so powerful. And when we finally got to the church, they said, they've already started walking, the pastors and some of the men. And we were like, well, we had already discussed that. Well, we probably wouldn't walk. Kind of bad for us. We said, our relatives already walked, and we'll get wet. We're in our dresses, And they were going to do this program. We'll be sopping wet. Mm-hmm. So then we drove to catch up with them, and there was a long line of cars behind the pastors. There was 5 men walking with their umbrellas just blowing in the wind. And our hearts were just so touched, because they had done and they had practiced what we were hoping to reveal. They had took up that mantle for us this day, and they walked a portion of the commemorative trail, that 1 mile for us in the rain. Now, last year we had the commemorative Trail of Tears walk on the Northern Trail in Cannon County through the town of Woodbury, where I now live. And we had our own education, We were just walking, commemorating. But from that year, 2002, we learned that we started dipping into history. And so I so appreciate Toy. Toy and I and his family, we go back years from the first time I moved to Tennessee. But
now my next guest is somebody you know as well.
Yes.
She has also been working to keep this history alive. Helen Tarleton has been helping to organize an annual Trail of Tears walk in her community in Whites Creek since 2019. Helen, thank you so much for joining the show today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Khalil. I'm so happy to be here.
Tell me, how did you... Honored. It's an honor to have you, really. Tell me, how did you come to learn that your house was by part of the route for the Trail of Tears?
Well, there's a sign in Madison going across a bridge that is on Old Hickory Boulevard. And because I knew of the Hermitage Association, I just assumed that it went all the way around Old Hickory Boulevard. And that's where my house is, in Whites Creek. So that's how I learned about it.
So once you learned, how did that knowledge sit with you?
Well, I would sit on my front porch, and my house is right across the street from a beautiful field. And oftentimes, especially in the fall, I would just sit there and think about the fact that people had suffered so much going right in front of my house. So it didn't sit well. And I talked it over with a friend and in the neighborhood, and she and I started kind of daydreaming about doing some kind of commemorative walk. And we took it to our two local organizations, the Whites Creek Historical Society and the Friends of Whites Creek. And they were very supportive and helped me get in touch with Melba. So we piloted the first one in 2019.
What were those initial conversations you had with Melba? What were they like?
Melba was just so receptive and enthusiastic about supporting us. And I was really, our group was really interested in wanting to learn about how they had approached it in Woodbury and what the focus was. We were just, very, we wanted to do whatever we did. We wanted it to be focused on commemoration and reconciliation. And Melba was so helpful with finding the right language to use for that. And then she offered to come, which was even more terrific. And she and I became friends.
That's beautiful. Melba, what was that like for you to go on that walk?
Awesome, because we'd been walking several years at that time, and we had made a commitment towards the reconciliation of our land. We cannot change what history has done. I mean, heavens, we don't like to think about it. We were taught, our people were taught never to look back, always looking up ahead, never look back. Don't come back either. We were really taught that. And so it's always surprising to think about living in these areas that our Mikos, our kings, our chieftains, headmen told us, don't go back.
How does that affect or change your relationship with the land?
I am happy to be on our homeland. I feel blessed to have an opportunity to walk where we were, to walk in those footsteps, to try to remember in prayer and reconciliation. Because we cannot change what happened, we have to look for a better day. And that comes with, I know Jeanette Washington, my cousin's wife, she and I were the go-getters. She passed on early, and so I have missed her so many years, but we decided that we can't be bitter. We had spent a lot of our life feeling kind of bitter about that, kind of angry and even hateful. And we decided we cannot do that because we walk in a new day. We have survived. We're still here. And we have an opportunity to tell about our history and to help others who live on our land today to know how much it meant to us to be here and for them to continue in a good way.
Now, Helen, I understand that you also have an ancestor who was indirectly involved with the Trail of Tears. Tell us a little bit about him. What role did he play?
So I have an ancestor whose name was Andrew Pickens, and he was actually a Revolutionary era general, and he was appointed as one of the Indian Treaty Commissioners. And in the first part of his life, he was a soldier who was responsible for the destruction and devastation of the Cherokee villages, but then pivoted pretty quickly after those early wars and became a really, anyway, devoted the rest of his life to working to develop treaty negotiations, and worked closely with one of the Creek leaders, Alexander McGillivray. It took him years and years to develop trust with Alexander McGillivray, but he did, and just was devoted to trying to create rights to defend land holdings for all of the tribes, all of the bands. And we know the story of the treaties, so we know what happened in the end. It didn't really hold, but he worked pretty hard in his lifetime to try to defend the land of the people in this part of the country, of the Native people.
Tell me, how have you been able to reconcile with this part of your family's history?
Well, it's been a long time, and it's a work in progress. I think the relationships and my commitment to the relationships that I have with people like Melba is a huge part of it. Working through the Whites Creek Historical Society and the Friends of Whites Creek. There's a beautiful quote by Parker Palmer, and it's not long, so I'm just going to share it because I think this has been a driving thing for me.
Please.
Nothing that is worth doing can be achieved in our lifetime. Therefore, we must be saved by hope. Nothing which is true or beautiful or good makes complete sense in any immediate context of history. Therefore, we must be saved by faith. Nothing we do, however virtuous, can be accomplished alone. Therefore, we're saved by love.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You know,
and I also think that just another quick piece I'll add is just that I think that I actually believe guilt is a healthy emotion. I think it's something that is designed for us to get our attention and gives us an opening for learning. And so, when we've done the walks with Melba, we've taken the extra step to make time to sit together and to learn more and to build our relationships from the heart. And I think that is, to me, the essential part of what needs to happen in order for all of us to kind of create the world we want moving forward.
Toy Heap from the Native History Association is still with us. Now, Toy, tell me, are there any more plans to make the trail more visible?
Yes, we've been working for a long time to get the trail marked. The National Park Service puts up markers that show where the trail is. They have a logo for the National Historic Trail. And there have been a lot of delays. We were working on it back in early 2020. The National Park Service drew up a draft sign plan. We were just about to start communicating to the public officials to try to get the signs put up. And then the pandemic happened, so that kind of put that on the back burner. But the Native History Association has plans to return to that and try to get the sign plan implemented for Nashville and Davidson County.
Mm-hmm. Now, we have about just under a minute left, but Melba, I want to ask you, what does it mean to be living here? We're on this land with this history. How can all of us kind of best come to understand this and to take a good step so we can come to terms with this? Just under a minute.
I was going to say, last year we had our commemorative Trail of Tears walk in Woodbury, and we dedicated 11 new signs through Cannon County on the original trail. And that is such a great thing because people would not know. The Cherokees have a bike ride each year that come through. Our people left from Blythe's Ferry Landing, which is called today the Cherokee Removal Park. It's over kind of near Cleveland. And so this is a park that people can visit and see the trailways. What is missing from that park is they don't mention the Muscogee people. So our tribe is in the process now and have everything done to have a monument put to the Muscogee people that walked with the Cherokee on the Northern Trail. And they left from there and they went through Woodbury and right through Nashville here.
We'll be looking forward to that. We have to end it here. I want to thank you so much. That is Melba Chakotay. She's a native activist from the Muscogee Creek Nation of Oklahoma. She was joined by Toy Heap from the Native History Association and Helen Tarleton from Whites Creek. I want to thank you all for being here and thank you for sharing your stories.
Thank you for having me.
We want to thank everybody who tuned in this hour. Tomorrow, we'll learn how our Iranian and Kurdish communities are responding to the recent events and recent protests in Iran. This is Nashville is a production of WPLN News and Nashville Public Radio. Listen back at thisisnashville.org or wherever you get your podcasts. Our producers are Steve Harouche and Rose Gilbert, digital lead, Anna Gallegos-Cannon. Michaela Elias is our technical director. Our executive producer is Andrea Tudhope. Shout out to our intern, Tori Hoover, and the masterminds behind our theme music, Laurent and Namir Blade. Special thanks to Mr. Albert Bender. I'm Khalil Ekalona. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody. Be good to each other.